Jason. On this week's edition of the program, we will be focusing on the issue of inflation, as the World Bank suggests that Nigeria might experience one of the highest forms of inflation in the year 2022, and also the 7th in sub-Saharan Africa. We will be right back. Ahead of the mass protest scheduled to hold on January 27, 2022, we can say that preparations are in top gear as the Nigerian Labour Congress and the civil society organizations are in a closed-down meeting here in Lagos, Nigeria. The national president of the Nigerian Labour Congress attended a meeting and addressing workers. And from the look of things, we can say that mobilization has commenced, and the protest will take place across all the states except the FCT.
They have made pronouncement clearly that by February there will be a hike in the price of PMS. I think the National Economic Council proposed about 302 naira, and the Minister of Finance came also openly to make pronouncement about the policy. And therefore we are saying that we reject that policy because it's going to inflict more hardship on Nigerians, particularly those on fixed wages and even those in the informal sector.
As he said, the action is actually intended to halt the intended hike in price of petrol. So this is a caution action. You may call it warning, but it's a protest that is actually geared in stopping government from taking undue policy action against Nigerians.
We're not doing mass protests for looking for solidarity on something that is impacting some other people. Then you can be called a busybody. It's an action we're doing for ourselves.
This is just a warning protest. But if the government fails and the government, have to go ahead and implement this wicked policy then we will mobilize Nigerians, we will mobilize everybody, and then it's going to be a total shutdown until the government reverts back to the old order.
Recently, the president of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria says is not against the removal of fuel subsidy if it's going to yield positive results. TUC is a counterpart of the Nigerian Labour Congress, but according to reports, there is a National Executive Council meeting which will be held very soon, and that will determine the next line of action. The Lagos State Joint Public Service Negotiating Council trade union side has charged the Lagos State Health Management Agency to keep its promise to ensure the labor force in the state gets the best as regards health insurance. At a joint session on health insurance awareness campaign with the theme Talk the Work and Walk the Talk, the chairman of the council, Olusegun Ramon Balogun, alerted the Lagos State Health Management Agency that productivity anywhere is a function of sound minds, body and soul.
With the insurance scheme now, once you're contributing, definitely we are contributing. The premium is 40,000 and government is contributing 75% of that fund, while workers are contributing 25% of that. We understand that the government has done so well by providing that 75% of the entire premium, but getting to the hospital, having this access is what we are actually talking about here. But with this program now, it's going to be very educative so that our members can have that information that anytime you get to those facilities and they're talking at something quite contrary to what they're having now, they have numbers that they can call directly and those issues will be resolved.
The chairman of the Lagos State Health Management Agency affirms that actionable steps were on to bring the state closer to universal health coverage since its beginning of its plan, which includes the payment of 75% of insurance premium for public servants in the state and creating the State Equity Fund, which is 1% of the state consolidated revenue fund used to pay premium for poor and vulnerable residents in the state.
So right now, We have about 90% of civil servants already on the scheme and benefiting from it. What we pride ourselves in as an agency is that we are very customer-centric. We know that the public servants are the bedrock of Ilera Eco, and so we don't joke with those issues. We listen very actively, and every single feedback that we have gotten, we make sure that we work on it, and we're a continuous work in progress. We know that there's nothing that is totally perfect, but certainly if you look at where we're coming from and our journey, there is a vast improvement. As you can see, we're having this sit down with them today, so it shows that there is constant interaction, and the best is yet to come for us.
Please come on board Lashma. It's very important for you and your family. Don't look at it as another government lost cause. It is a cause being pushed deliberately by the governor of Lagos State, Mr. Governor, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, and the Honorable Commissioner of Lagos State, Professor Kia Bayomi. They're all interested in it, and the aim is to help all Lagosians, everybody resident in Lagos, including the civil servants, stay healthy and also wealthy.
It was noted during the event that health insurance plan for workers in the public sector will assist the workforce have unrestricted access to health care regardless of their income, and also give added protection at a time where cost of hospitalization and medical expenses is high.
I am so much concerned as a public servant who is sustaining his means of livelihood through salary and wages. And the basic characteristics of salary is the fact that it remains constant over a long period of time, irrespective of change in the price of goods and services. And whether he likes it or not, as a worker, he is bound to purchase goods, he is bound to access certain services in order to make his or her living. That is the reason why it is worrisome that over about 5 or 6 years now, we have been witnessing continuous increment in the value of inflation in our country. Can we say it is a signal or evidence that we are not having the right people managing the economy of this nation? And this is a pointer to the fact that Mr. President should look inward, and probably within the shortest period of time he has to lead this country, overhaul his cabinet and put in place those who can rightly manage the economy of this nation.
I think for an average Nigerian worker, presently they are sad, they are not happy, they are disheartened as a result of the fact that if you take a look at the present economic realities now, you know that things are very, very difficult, particularly since the outbreak of the COVID-19. You know, as labor leaders, one thing we've noticed is that there has been this constant attack on the right of workers. And like I always say, despite the fact that workers are at the front end of this crisis, they are equally at the receiving end of it. And if you notice, the minimum wage we negotiated some years back, they've made a mockery of the whole arrangement. Presently, a bag of rice is over 30,000, which is even more than the minimum wage. If you notice, the inflationary trend for the past 3 years has been double digits, and I don't think for any civilized country that is the right trend that it should be.
It is definitely not a happy time for anybody. Whether you're a worker, whether you're a retiree, anything that you are in Nigeria, it is definitely not a happy time for us. Everything has gone up. Even the rate at which it has gone up is so alarming. It is even far above 100%. So it is not a good time for us, and everybody is weeping silently. But I want to say that there's a great need for the government to come out and address this situation once and for all. It is not time, this is not time to sit on the face and expect reactions. And when you choose not to say anything to the populace, to the citizenry, then you are leaving them to take a decision on their own. What is there in fixing the economy? Fix it, do the needful. For petroleum, we have heard over the years that they are fixing refineries, yet nothing is coming on board. These are promises that have not been kept, and as representative of the labor, we are not pleased one bit.
On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the president of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, Taiwo Adeniyi, speaks to the challenges that the organized private sector is faced with and profile possible solutions. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
A lot has been happening in the organized private sector. But I think we should start with the issue of COVID-19 before we get into the integrities of what the challenges may be. COVID-19 pandemic, the world of work, it's a global challenge. Everybody's still trying to recover. But right now, as we speak, we're still faced with the issue of inflation. As organized private sector, how would you say you've been coping?
Thank you very much, again, Sharon. Inflation. Now, don't forget, one of the prognoses as we're ending that year was that because this is a pre-election year, we are going to have spikes in the inflation figures. And what that means is that we have, for instance, issues with a lot of funds were flying around in the economy. And we're going to begin to now have challenges with what we used to be able to manage. Pandemic is still there. Not much have changed in terms of the effect of the pandemic on the work-life patterns of a number of the things that we do, except to say that, yes, more people are now getting vaccinated, so a lot more are now feeling comfortable to go to work and even work, as it were. A lot of what used to be on the, the virtual platform are now getting back to the physical platform. That is to say that we are now gradually beginning to accept that, look, this thing is not going to go away for a while, but we're now going to have to live with it somehow, manage our lives, obey as much as possible the restrictions that have been put in place, or the physical treatments that we have, of the fact that the non-medical treatments that we have. So people are now accepting the fact that, okay, even with the vaccine, there's every possibility that I could still have COVID. So I better wear my mask for whatever it's worth. So what we're saying to our members is that please encourage your staff members, your workforce, to be vaccinated so that they can bring life around you again. So that's how we'll be managing it. It's not as though we've gotten the golden answer to it, but to some extent, what we're doing is now to manage it, accept our fate, and push on until we survive it.
Talking about tax, there is this report that there's every indices that there might be further increase in value-added tax, and it's probably not up to a year that we Nigerians actually had to face the reality of paying more in terms of value-added tax. Do you think this is the right time, looking at the current inflation digits that just came out, do you think this is the right time for us to increase, for the government to further increase value-added tax?
I would say a capital no. A capital no in the sense that you can't muzzle the horse that treads the corn. You have the organized private sector. We had several engagements before the last increase was done. And everybody felt, yes, is long overdue. Again, in the best of circumstances, what else can we do? This government must get going. Now you've done it successfully. People are now paying. What we're saying to government is that, look, any increase in tax will further plunge the economy in the negative. So, rather, the work for government is how to increase the tax net, not belabor the people that are already paying these taxes, and not try to increase and imagine that if you increase, after all, they accepted your first increase. They will accept it and just carry on with their life. A point comes, there's always an elastic limit. You get to a point where you think that somebody who you are doing that to will continue to absorb it and just go. No. A time will come when the person will push back. So you do not tread the horse. I mean, you don't muzzle the horse that treads the corn. You must bear in mind that a time comes that the next thing will be to say, look, sorry, we cannot pay. And then, or if we're going to pay, then we also have to do something about what we do. Either we reduce our workforce to be able to meet, because if outflow keeps increasing, then something must happen to the internally to be able to continue to meet those obligations. So it's not about government increasing the obligation. It's about government looking for innovative ways. So government should be taxing our internal revenue services, or even at the federal level too. Taxing all of those areas, they start there. That look, your target this month, increase the tax net by this percentage. After all, that's how we run organizations. So give them time and say, okay, in 6 months, your tax net must increase by this percentage. Measure it and see how far they go. And I'm sure that if that is done, we'd rather focus our attention more on the increase of the tax net rather than increase the tax, the figures. And that will bring in more revenue. Because if you continue to increase, a time will come that you won't be able to anymore. So what will you do at that point?
Then that takes us to the call for the suspension of the excise duty on carbonated drinks. We know that there is not much that can be done at this point. But of course, we know what sugar is for many Nigerians. I'm concerned what will be the reaction of the employers of labor who actually would have to purchase some items at a higher cost, looking at the challenges that organized private businesses or the economy is faced with. So do you think this is the right step in the right direction at this point in time?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, before the release of the 2022 budget and the interaction with the finance minister, we had several engagements with concerned authorities as relates to reintroduction of the excise duty on carbonated drinks, sugar coming. But again, we made our points known to them. But as it is with government, the best they've come back to us with is the fact that it's inevitable. Yes, we may not be able to determine the level of inevitability, but it's been done. Now, there are implications. What they have projected to us, or what they've said, or the reasons they have given, if you take a critical look at that, you would almost conclude that they have some good reasons. But I tell you that it's not just about sugar. Sugar is just one of those things that causes or that increases or predisposes somebody to diabetes, as but there are several other things that predisposes anybody to diabetes as well. So it's not a strong point for government looking at the health and saying that, okay, we want to be able to use it to control the sugar consumption of no, we're not babies. But again, it's a way to also rake in as much as possible. But government should be prepared that the implication is, okay, if I used to sell at 1 naira for sake of this interview, and now I have to sell at 1 naira 10 kobo, say for sake of this interview, those who cannot afford it will just turn their back at it. Those who still can afford it will continue to buy. Now, when my revenue decreases, the implication is that I will look inward. And looking inward means that I'm going to look at my cost. If, for instance, I look at my cost, and I know that before now, I use 10 people to produce 100. And when I produce 100, I sell 100. If now I use 10 people to produce 100, and the best I can sell is 90, that's a pointer to the fact that I do not need 10 people again to produce 100 for me, because I'm not going to sell 100. So it has a backslash on the workforce, on the employers of labor. And so we are appealing to government to begin to shelve the idea of sitting down and looking at ways to rake in money, and begin to look at ways to help the organized private sector to be well grounded and do what they are supposed to do, rather than look for more ways. Which other way can we bring in money? It appears that's what the discussion is always at the government cycle, and it's so unfortunate.
Looking at the several gains or challenges that the economy might have faced in the last couple of years, what would you say would be the necessary ingredients to have a robust economy that will favor businesses, which will in turn, of course, favor workers?
Businesses do not operate in isolation. Businesses operate in an environment. Every environment is subjected to both internal and external forces. As much as you may not be able to undo in totality what those external forces are, but you can recognize your internal forces and deal with those internal forces, because they are internal to you. You could marshal every of your resources around it and get it addressed. And so, if I go on to start reeling out a number of these internal forces, going from over-regulation, over-taxation, and everything is all around over. We're glad to note that just recently, the president appointed a renowned economist as an advisor on the economy of the country. We are waiting to see what effect that would have if it will be allowed to work. Because what has happened is that some time to come, we're now going to begin to see a critical analysis of our economy and a better advisory role from renowned economists to the government. So, for instance, I would expect that such individuals who have been saddled with that responsibility will do a lot more of interaction with the organized private sector to know. Because if we recognize the contribution of organized private sector to this economy, then such individuals should always have some form of interactive section, some roundtable discussion, always with the organized private sector. It's okay, let's fill your pulse. What is it that you think, if we do, would move your contribution to the economy from this point to that point? That's what we expect. And we hope that robust interaction will start as soon as it settles in, and that would have good impact on the economy.
Finally, what is organized private sector's opinion on the proposed removal of fuel subsidy?
Our point is, tell us what area you are going to begin to work on as a result of the removal of subsidy. if you remove subsidy, for instance, you are telling us that there will be more money in the purse of government to be able to do a lot more for the generality of the public. That's the whole essence of wanting to remove the subsidy. All the discussions that we've had to date about removal of subsidy, I might be wrong. I haven't seen one that have said to me that, okay, subsidy 2021, we paid 670 or 680 or 800 or 1 million or whatever figure it is. We paid this much on subsidy. And I'm aware that it runs into billions. But as soon as we stop subsidy, month one, this is what we're going to do with the fund. Month two, this is what we're going to do with the fund. Now, if you engage the generality of the public along that line of discussion, there's every possibility. And again, there is supposed, by now, I expect that a lot of advocacy, a lot of education, educating the general public to know that, look, this is what we want to do. This will be the outcome of what we are going to do. This is the effect, overall effect. So it's not just about saying that you are going to pay more in terms of fuel, in terms of the cost of fuel, no, or the cost of transportation, no. But in the long run, you have to be able to convince me that in the long run, when you remove the subsidy, I will benefit from it. Because all that has been said to us to date is that just a bunch of people are the ones, certain group of people are the ones benefiting from subsidy. Yes, we agree with that postulation, but we're saying that if you remove it, what are you going to do with the funds that initially you were spending on subsidy? Tell us.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.